In this video, I am going to talk about stress in relationships, specifically romantic, intimate kind of relationships. And I will also share with you certain ideas, certain techniques that you could use to manage stress in these relationships. Although some of those suggestions will be applicable to even other relationships, even workplace relationships. We have this implicit belief that intimate relationships, that romantic relationships are the greatest source of our happiness. This is also illustrated well in this quote from William Lyon Phelps. There is no doubt that relationships can be a major source of our satisfaction, happiness, well-being, no doubt about it. But it is also true that they can be one of the major stressors in our lives. And we have seen that in the various studies that I've shared with you before. But even some of the other categories that we see here could be classified as relationship related stress. Family responsibilities, for instance. If spouses are fighting about who is supposed to be doing what, about their shared responsibilities, that's a relationship problem. Health problems affecting the family. Again, we do want to take care of our family members when they are sick, but it still adds stress to our lives. Sometimes there could be a fight in the family because an in-law is sick and one spouse doesn't want to take care of that in-law. So even they could manifest as relationship problems. The biggest contributor to stress, which was called money, is often manifested in relationships, right? Not having enough money, or even having enough money, but how you are spending that money. So that is often manifested again as a relationship related problem. Even some of the work issues, one of the major contributors of work related stress is lack of work-life balance. So lack of work-life balance is often classified as a work-related stress, but that could also be reclassified as a relationship-oriented stress because you are not giving enough attention to your family members, to your intimate partner, and that becomes the cause of stress. So if we combine all these things together, it may turn out that relationship is the most important or the biggest stressor in our lives. This might seem too pessimistic, too negative, but actually I am one of the most optimistic persons about anything, including romantic relationships. What I don't want is the idealization of romantic relationships. And in fact, as we will see, such idealization of romantic relationships is what often causes a lot of problems in our lives. But this is something that we are taught through those, romantic movies that they lived happily ever after. Those are not rooted in reality. That's not how real life functions. But when we have these idealizations and we get into those romantic relationships, when that idealization gets shattered, that's when we get depressed. That's when we lose hope in relationships. That's when we lose faith in relationships. And that becomes the platform from which there is bigger problem in the relationship as well as in any future relationship that we may take up. Now let's go through the different stages through which our intimate relationships develop. The term stages can be a little bit misleading because we may not exactly go through these stages one after the other. Second stage may not exactly start after the end of stage one, and so on and so forth. Another way of thinking about it is they are like manifestations of intimate love or love in intimate relationships. Because we will see changes in pattern across cultures and also across certain individual groups, individuals. In any case, what's the first stage? It's the being in love stage. It's the physical manifestation of love. And by physical, we mean the sexual manifestation of love. It's the stage characterized by lust. It's the dominant hormones here are testosterone and DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone in males, and estrogen in females. Again, does not mean that testosterone is present only in males and not in females, and vice versa. Though testosterone is in much higher concentration in males than it is in females, 10 times more higher. And it plays a huge role in the males being horny. Similarly, estrogen plays a huge role as well. So in the proliferative phase of the menstrual cycle, the estrogen levels peak. And so these are the important hormones that play a huge role in the sexual arousal of individuals. And because of these hormones, there is a high level of affection, physical expression of affection that we see in relationships. And we also become blind to people's or our partner's faults. We don't see any shortcomings, because if you see from an evolutionary perspective, this helps us in procreation, right? It helps us in engaging in a conjugal relationship for long enough period of time so that we can procreate, and that then increases the possibility that the species continues. So this being in love stage is associated with being in heightened state of positive emotions. We may share a lot of gifts, small gifts. We may discuss sweet nothings in each other's ears, and this is a very pleasant state. So we will typically not see any stress as such in this stage, though we can, especially if we see our expression of physical intimacy being frustrated by the partner or by situational factors, then we may feel extremely stressed. But otherwise, if especially there is mutual attraction between the couple, and there is possibility of that attraction being consummated, then we will not see any stress as such during this stage of the relationships. The next stage is called the attachment stage. And by attachment, we are talking about psychological attachment. Does not mean that there is no more physical relationship in form of sex. There will be physical relationships, but this stage is characterized more through more milder forms of physical expressions, in form of holding hands, in form of hugging, in form of cuddling, gazing into your partner's eyes, which all is about formation of a psychological bond with the person. So just being with the presence of the other person feels good. There are two major hormones that typically get associated with this stage. One is dopamine. Again, dopamine secretions will also happen in the previous stage. Not that it doesn't play a role there, but typically it is described to be more relevant, should I say, in this stage, because dopamine is considered a reward neurotransmitter. Though it is not strictly speaking secreted after we get a reward. Rather, it happens more in anticipation of something rewarding, something pleasant. So that then actually motivates us to want to seek, want to work towards getting that reward. So in this case, it will be wanting to spend time with your partner. Serotonin is the other neurotransmitter here, which plays again a big role. You would remember serotonin is the wakefulness hormone because it almost goes in the opposite direction of melatonin. While melatonin will make us feel asleep, serotonin, makes us feel awake. But another important aspect of serotonin is that it makes us feel relaxed. It makes us feel happy. So if you secrete serotonin in presence of your partner, that means you're feeling good. You're developing those positive attachment with your partner. Whereas if there isn't enough secretion of serotonin or enough secretion of dopamine, then you aren't finding the relationship as pleasant, and then development of that attachment will be difficult. So this actually then takes us to different attachment styles, which I discuss in the next slide. The idea of attachment styles originates from John Bowlby's research, who studied the mother-child interactions and how the nature of those interactions impacted the formation of different styles, which then impacts how happy we will be in different relationships. So let's talk about the 3 styles that he identified. In fact, instead of I starting to describe each of those styles, let me read out a few statements and see which of the statements describe you best. The first one: I find it relatively easy to get close to others, and I'm comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't worry about being abandoned or someone getting too close to me. Is this something that describes you well? Or is it the second statement? I find others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner does not really love me or won't want to stay with me. I want to get very close to my partner, and this sometimes scares people away. What about this statement? Does this describe you better? Or is it this third statement? I am somewhat uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, difficult to allow myself to depend on them. I am nervous when anyone gets too close, and often others want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable being. So which of these statements describe you well? The first statement is what is called the secure attachment style, also called the adjusted, well-adjusted style. Because here you are comfortable trusting your partner, you are comfortable depending on your partner, you don't worry about your partner abandoning you or your partner breaking your trust. So that then helps you get closer to your partner. Now, the second one is called the anxious style. Here you are worried that you are not good enough, and your partner may then reject you. And this then makes you very needy. You are trying to get close to your partner, but at the same time you are worried that your partner won't accept you. So there is a component of fear there. So you're anxious about whether or not your partner will embrace you the way you would like to be embraced by your partner, metaphorically. So that then makes you very needy, which then actually makes you even more repulsive, right? No one likes needy people. So that is the anxious style. And finally, we have what is called the avoidant style. And here, because of, again, whatever reasons, you find it difficult trusting your partner. You are worried that this person may betray your trust, and that is the reason you don't want to even get close to this person. You maintain a distance, psychological distance at least. So you don't want to get too close. So in contrast to anxious, where you're trying to be too close to the person, working a little too hard to be close to the person, here you are working in the opposite direction. You are avoiding getting too close to the person. So these are the three different styles. And numerous factors can contribute to the development of one or either of these styles, including your personality traits, for instance, but your life experiences, both during the early childhood, even in later years. But nonetheless, in context of the hormones, if you have higher dopamine and serotonin levels, we will see that to be most associated with secure attachment. Whereas if your serotonin level is low, you are worried that whether or not you will be getting attached to this person. In fact, your stress hormones could also go up, right? Both in form of cortisol or maybe even norepinephrine to varying extents. Let's quickly discuss the personality correlates of these attachment styles, because we have discussed personality in greater detail in one of the previous videos. Now let's take a look at the results from this 2006 paper, Knopfler and Schaefer's paper, that studied the relationship between the big five personality dimensions and the two dysfunctional attachment styles, the anxious and the avoidance attachment style. The results for the anxious attachment styles are very clear and straightforward. What do we see is that neuroticism is the strongest predictor. In fact, all the subdimensions of neuroticism were positively correlated with anxious attachment. Conscientiousness was the next predictor, and they were negatively correlated. All the subdimensions of conscientiousness were negatively correlated with anxious attachment. In other words, the more conscientious you are, the less likely you will be anxious in your attachment style. The results for the avoidance style were not as clear. We do see a mixed pattern here. So some significant subdimensions, but many non-significant subdimensions too. So we see here some significant but some non-significant. In case of conscientiousness, we see that all of these subdimensions are negatively correlated with avoidance, but not all of them are statistically significant. But the fact that they are all negatively correlated can give us some indication that conscientiousness can still be a fairly good predictor of avoidance style, and that makes sense. If you are a conscientious person, you would probably will be more committing as opposed to avoiding relationships. But since the data here is not as clear, for example, in agreeableness, we see two factors negatively correlated, one factor positively correlated. We can see why some dimensions are negatively correlated, because agreeableness is a dimension with these people are very trusting individuals. So naturally, if you trust your partner, if you are trusting in nature, you will not avoid people, right? So because this is not as clear, especially for the avoidant dimension, let's take a look at the regression equation results. But before that, actually one more thing that I want to highlight is the correlation, negative correlation between some of the extraversion subdimensions and avoidance. Again, that would make sense because extroverted individuals, it's a personality dimension associated with seeking individuals. Avoidant people will avoid making that connection with people. So that is the reason we are seeing this negative correlation. In any case, let's take a look at the regression equation. So let's see what they find in the regression equation, because regression equations are much more precise when it comes to um, predicting the outcome variables. So again, we have the same outcome variables here, anxious attachment style and avoidance attachment style. And when it comes to anxious attachment style, neuroticism is the strongest predictor. So if you are neurotic, then it is highly likely that you will be having an anxious attachment style. Conscientiousness was the next big predictor. Not as big a predictor as neuroticism, but still a pretty strong predictor. And it was in the negative direction. The more conscientious you are, the less likely you will have an anxious attachment style. Agreeableness was also statistically significant, though the beta value is really small. But still, if we take that into account, the more agreeable you are, the less likely you will be anxious in your attachment style. But again, I won't give too much of importance here because the beta value is pretty small. In any case, 20% of the variance in people's attachment style could be explained by these big five personality factors. 20% may seem small to you, but that's a huge amount of variance, especially if we take social sciences into account. Now let's see the avoidance attachment style. When it comes to the big five personality traits, agreeableness was the strongest predictor. The more agreeable you are, the less likely you will be avoiding individuals. And as I was mentioning, because these are trusting people, so they will not avoid relationships. They will easily trust people and not try to avoid them. Conscientiousness was the second, extraversion was the second big predictor, minus 0.11. As I was mentioning before, these people seek out relationships. They are friendly, they seek out relationships. And that is the reason we see this negative relationship here. And we also see a negative relationship with respect to conscientiousness. And probably because conscientious individuals are much more likely to commit to relationships as opposed to avoiding. But another really interesting thing that we find is that people who were not in relationships were more likely to be avoidant. Now, this can be a chicken and egg kind of situation. Because you were avoidant, are you not in a relationship, or is it that you not being in a relationship is causing you to be avoidant? That's something that we could debate, but typically in the regression equation we are seeing avoidance as the dependent variable. So the relationship status, you not being in a committed relationship, is being used as a predictor for you being avoidant in your style. But the relationships, overall relationships, it's less strong here because only 8% of the variance was explained by the big five personality traits. The relationship status still was significant even in the previous equation. Anyway, so you see that it does, your personality traits do influence your attachment styles. So what is the practical implication of all this when it comes to stress management in relationships? This is more to do with actually prevention than cure. So we need to choose our partners wisely, because remember, we are talking about the attachment stage here, not the initial physical stage, being in love stage. So if we are talking about long-term attachment, we have higher probability of getting happiness in our relationships if both we as well as our partners are higher on these two dimensions, conscientiousness and agreeableness. And in context of having a lower probability of avoidant style, maybe to a certain extent, the extroversion dimension as well. And similarly, we need to avoid people who are highly neurotic. So that's what I would say. This is more to do with prevention. if we choose the right kind of partners, then we will be much more likely to be having a secure form of attachment. Again, remember, this personality is not the only predictor. There are other predictors as well. But if we can take this into account as well, then we are reducing our chances of unhappiness or too much of stress in our intimate relationships. So this then brings us to the last stage, the third stage, nurturing stage. A nurturing stage is more to do with long-term relationships where the partners even take parenting responsibilities. So you decide to have a child, you have the child, then you nurture the child, you help rear up the child so that the child then grows up into a responsible adult. So you may nurture each other also in the relationship. So the two major hormones that are described here are oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin, you will remember, is often described as a cuddling hormone. So we typically see a rise in oxytocin levels in mothers after childbirth, because that then prepares the mother to take care of the child. In any case, the important thing to remember here is this. If we think in terms of the big 5 personality traits, which personality trait do you think would be the best predictor for nurturing? If you said agreeableness, that's right, because people who are higher on agreeableness dimension, they tend to be more empathetic, they tend to be more altruistic, they care for people, they are more compassionate, they are more nurturing. So especially when it comes to, if you are a guy and looking for a long-term relationship with a woman, in women especially, it matters that the person is higher on agreeableness. It may not matter as much for men, because men have a lesser role to play when it comes to nurturing of young children. But anyway, I'm talking more in terms of prevention, getting into the right kind of relationship so that you won't have a huge need to manage the stress in the relationships. But we will talk about that as well next. In context of what we have discussed so far, here are a few recommendations about how to manage stress in our existing relationships. So the first one is cognitive reframing, also known as cognitive restructuring. This is part of cognitive behavior therapy. Again, I won't go into the details of cognitive behavior therapy, but if we talk about it in very simple terms, it means changing our thoughts, our beliefs, especially if they are maladaptive, if they are not helping us live a happier, better life. Not all our thoughts, not all our beliefs are actually rational. They may be not rooted in reality also. In the present reality, they may have been at one point of time very rooted in reality, but at this point of time, they may not be the case. So it's about re-evaluating our beliefs and how those beliefs, those dysfunctional beliefs, are contributing to our unhappiness in the present. For example, when we talked about the anxious attachment style and avoidant attachment style, yes, they do get influenced by our personality traits, but a large part of it gets influenced by our belief systems too. And how do we form these beliefs? It could be based on our early childhood experiences, which was part of Bowlby's primary research. But it could be something that has happened in the recent past as well. If I had a really horrible relationship experience in the past, then that can color my relationship in the present, right? So that emotional baggage will then impact the happiness in the present relationship. I may either become too anxious in my current relationship, or I may avoid committing. So both can be problematic, as you can realize. So when we are talking about cognitive reframing, we are talking about, first of all, bringing that awareness of our implicit beliefs, um, and we can get that awareness when we succeed succeed in quietening our mind. That's the reason meditation works again really well here as well. But then once we get that awareness, then taking the necessary steps to change those beliefs. Anyway, let's go to the second one. Partners must give others some independence. Again, I'm saying some, not complete independence. That probably will not be practical. You can't, for a relationship to work, you can't just say that the partner can do anything. If he or she can even kill people and you will be okay with that relationship. No, it may not work, right? So, but you have to give your partner some space, some independence. If I discuss this in context of Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about 2 dimensions. Freedom, so that is one dimension, but the other dimension is responsibility, having responsibility in the relationship. So we are not talking about complete independence where you are doing everything on your own. That would be avoidant style. You don't need the other person then. But complete dependence on a person is also problematic because you are almost becoming parasitic. You are not giving anything to the other person and you are only taking. But this codependency, that can also be problematic, to a lesser extent than dependency is. But still, if we have 2 people who are completely dependent upon each other, while the relationship may work, but it can become problematic when things when diverse skills are required in situations, especially like those situations. So what is recommended is you follow the interdependence approach, where you may take some of the responsibilities, and your partner takes certain other responsibilities, but you switch things around also periodically, so that when your partner is absent, you are still being able to take the responsibility of the family, and the family is not completely devastated, which would happen, let's say, in codependence. So because one partner always does one thing and the other partner always does the other thing, so they are dependent on each other. One partner may always be earning and the other person may always be cooking at home. Somebody loses the job, that's a problem. The family breaks down then. So we need to have multiple competences, essentially. That's the point. In order for our long-term relationships to work, we cannot become completely dependent, completely needy. In fact, being needy is not attractive. It's not sexy. So that complete dependency is problematic. So there should be enough space that makes us then want us to be part of that relationship. So the other person feels enough freedom, but doesn't feel too constricted. Anyway, that's a lot of stuff. Partners should have room for personal growth. That's exactly what I was saying, and they both form of what I was just mentioning. The next point is partners must be authentic. Again, by authentic, it's not the suggestion that you should be yourself. No, that is really problematic suggestion. Now, what if your be yourself is a lousy, sloppy, and lazy self? That's not going to work well for the relationship, right? So it's about trying to better oneself, okay? But at the same time, not ignore one's own needs. So you should be open and honest about expressing your feelings. That is what being authentic is, So, but that open and being honest in expression of our thoughts and feelings does not necessarily mean that we have to be rude and nasty. Um, we need to express our needs more openly, what we want, what we so that is what assertiveness training is, being able to express our needs in a gentle manner without being aggressive, right? So this in fact is a problem for people who tend to be high on agreeableness. They can end up being pushovers, right? While agreeableness is good for nurturing and those things which is great for relationships, but if one person is very agreeable and the other person is not, or more on the disagreeable side, then that person who is agreeable may end up becoming a pushover and ultimately start resenting the relationship. So it's not going to work well. It is important, especially if you are higher on agreeableness dimension, that you develop those assertive communication skills where you express your needs, your feelings without being rude. And that's is something that's going to help in the building of the relationship. So we will keep it there. Okay, so let's do a quiz now. If you are trying to decide between two people for an intimate relationship, for a long-term happy relationship, who do you think is a better choice? If you are looking for a male partner, you can choose between John and Josh. If you are looking for a female partner, you could choose between Kate and Laura. So John and Kate, they describe themselves as someone who plays it safe and plans for the future. They feel it is very important to delay gratification today to get what they want and need in the future. They enjoy stability over all things. In contrast, Josh and Laura, they are impulsive. They love sensations. They are sensation seekers. They like to live in the now. They enjoy risky activities where they get a rush, like driving fast, drinking alcohol, and partying. They abhor monotony and change jobs often. So whom would you choose? Again, think about it very sincerely and then decide. And who would you choose here? Is it Jack or is it Johnny? Is it Anne or is it Julie? Jack and Anne, they describe themselves as team player. They would rather be a small cog in a large machine. And they like speaking the truth. They claim they speak the truth always. They would never say something they don't really believe in just to get ahead of the crowd. Johnny and Julie, they are not afraid to offend people. They speak their mind, but also happy to conceal some truths if beneficial in the long run. They are someone who could talk out of any situation using that charm and flattery. Whom would you choose? Whom would you choose here? Stephen or Josh? Lorna or Julie? Stephen and Lorna, they are not interested in new advertisements or fashion. They think there is no one better or worse than other people. They would rather blend in with the crowd than stand out. They are essentially very modest people. Whereas Josh and Julie, they are very assertive. They rarely depend on others to get things done. They like to be complimented and they like to look at themselves in the mirror. They like starting new fashions rather than simply following them. So whom would you choose here? Think about it and then I will share my thoughts. Those descriptions that you saw, they were actually explaining whether somebody was high or low on these dark triad traits. There are 3 traits. Triad, of course, means 3, and they are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These are problematic traits when it comes to relationships. They can be problematic in other situations as well, but we won't go there. The term psychopathy and narcissism may give you the impression that we are talking about clinical psychopaths or somebody who suffers from narcissistic disorders. We aren't talking about them here. That would be extreme psychopathy or extreme narcissism. Yes, if somebody scores extremely high on these dimensions, maybe they have those clinical conditions. But otherwise, we are talking about regular personality traits here. So we all may be narcissistic. We all are narcissistic to varying extent. If we are too narcissistic, that's a problem. So if I quickly explain narcissism without going into too much of detail, the focus is on the self, right? You like to feel superior, and that may manifest in form of grandiosity. You may have grandiose plans, but that may sometimes also manifest in form of you being really special because of being a special victim. You are special because of all the suffering that you have underwent. So it need not always manifest in form of grandiosity. In either case, you will see a high sense of entitlement. When it comes to Machiavellianism, it's about being manipulative. Again, the focus is still on the self, but you will do anything, hook or crook, you want to achieve what you want to achieve. So manipulative is the big part there. In psychopathy, you are very impulsive and you are unempathetic, and you don't have remorse for your actions. Those are some of the key things to describe each of these dark triad traits. Now let's see how do they relate to those descriptions of those people. So in the first case, we saw John and Kate describe themselves as wanting to delay gratification, and they're very stable. That is actually good. That's a sign that they are low on the psychopathy dimension. And we see that also in, remember, the trait of conscientiousness. So people who tend to be high on conscientiousness, that's the same thing that we see. Delaying gratification, again, I have the video link here, but you can quickly search it on YouTube and find the interesting experiments that were done on, they're famously known as the marshmallow experiments. Kids are given a piece of marshmallow. They are asked to wait for 15 minutes. And if they succeeded in waiting for 15 minutes, then they could get this second marshmallow. If they couldn't, if they ate it right away, they just, of course, got the one. The ones who succeeded in waiting for those 15 minutes were successful in delaying gratification, which then ultimately showed up in later life, 20, 30, 40 years later. They were much more successful. They were much more happy. Those videos are really funny. You should search for marshmallow experiment and see those videos. So the ability to delay gratification is a great ability to have. It may not seem sexy, it may not seem exciting, but that's also a sign of low psychopathy. And those are the kind of people you should be choosing for long-term relationships, not somebody who is extremely impulsive, a sensation seeker, or enjoys driving fast, drinking a lot of alcohol, partying. Again, just drinking alcohol does not automatically mean that you are high on psychopathy. It's a combination of things. Now, if you see an overall pattern, that there is a higher likelihood that this person scores, then this person is a person who is high on the psychopathy dimension. Now, what do we see here? We see Jack and Anne describing themselves as, well, it's not so much the personal description. In real life, you try to figure out from their lifestyle. So they are good team players. They would rather be, they're okay rather being a small cog in a machine. They never say something that they don't believe in. Whereas in contrast, Johnny and Julie, they were okay offending people, they were concealing information, they were using their charm and flattery to manipulate people to get what they really want. So ideally we should be choosing people who are low on Machiavellianism, not high on Machiavellianism, because again, these people do not typically have the likelihood of they having happy relationships is lower. Lastly, we have narcissism. Steven and Lorna, they blend in with the crowd. They're modest, whereas high narcissism, we are using the term assertive here in terms of just focusing on my needs. Remember, I said assertiveness as a skill is important, but if you are primarily focusing on your needs always, if you are very assertive, that can be problematic, right? So that could be a sign of always about me, my needs. That can be problematic. So again, this probably is obvious. Always looking at the mirror and always trying to look good. Again, to a moderate extent, those things are normal and fine. But if that's what dominates things, then that could be a sign that this person is highly narcissistic. So Jonathan and his colleagues have done some excellent research on how people with the dark triad personality traits approach mating. So what we see here is people who are highly narcissistic, they tend to prefer one night stands. So it is, you can see there's a positive effect here. I'm not going too much into the statistics here, but highly likely that they are only going to seek one night stands. People who are high on psychopathy, they have a strong preference for just those booty calls, as they are called. And both psychopathy and narcissism, they are negative predictors of serious romantic relationships. So again, you can see that that's if you are dating somebody with these traits, then it can be problematic, especially for long-term relationships. And here you see the overall dark triad composite. Anyone who is overall high on all these three traits, they tend to adopt what is called the ludus love style, which is just about having fun, but it's an uncommitted relationship. So putting this back into perspective of those three stages, the physical, the psychological, and the nurturing, the spiritual aspect of relationships, the deeper satisfaction that we may get would be more in the attachment stage and the later nurturing stage. And those stages will be possible if you are not dating somebody, or if you are not getting into a relationship who is high on these dark triad personality traits. So you should be avoiding people who are in the dark triad personality traits. Again, it's the same thing about prevention being better than cure. There is a famous quote from James Allen, the philosopher James Allen, that is relevant here. He said, "People do not attract that which they want, but that which they are." So if you yourself are also relatively high on these dark triad traits, you are more likely then to attract people also who are high on these dark triad traits. So Jonathan, whom I referred to before, he has done a lot of studies, and we see that those who are low on the dark triad traits, they tend to have a long-term mating strategy, whereas those who are high on the dark triad traits, they all prefer the one night stand kind of extremely short-term mating strategies. Women who are high in psychopathy, they even consider the male partners who are high on dark triads and more physical attractive. They find those people much more attractive, as well as seeing them as potential husband, which then can actually be problematic, right? Men who are high on psychopathy are likewise attracted to psychopathy in females. So this is the thing. If you are yourself low on these dark triad personality traits, you will be less likely to attract it to problematic people in your lives. And since I have talked a lot about the personality traits in my previous video as well, especially the big five personality traits, I must explain the dark triad traits in context of the big five personality traits, because that will make it easier for you to understand whom to look for. So the dark triad traits tell you whom to avoid, but whom should you look for? the big five personality traits will give you that idea. So we should not be going for people who have the dark triad personality traits. They are not the ideal choice for long-term relationships. Then whom should we be going for? To answer that question, I would like to compare this with the big five personality traits, which are something that you are already familiar with. This is from a paper in 2005 published by Lee and Ashton, who have done some exceptional work connecting the big five personality traits with the dark triad traits. And they have more recent publications on the topic as well, though I chose this one because it provides a good comprehensive view of all these connections, all these relationships. So what do we see here? We see that agreeableness is negatively correlated with psychopathy. It is also negatively correlated with Machiavellianism. When it comes to correlations that are statistically significant, right? So that means we could go for agreeable individuals. Agreeableness may not be an ideal trait in context of leadership, but it turns out to be a great quality to have in intimate, close relationships. Agreeableness, by the way, is the least correlated trait when it comes to leadership effectiveness. But as I said, in context of intimate relationships, we want people who are compassionate, who are caring, who are empathetic, who are nurturing. And this is something that we will see more amongst people who are agreeable. So that's something that we could look for in our partners. Similarly, we could look for people who are conscientious, because that is negatively correlated with Machiavellianism. These are dependable people. These are people who are less likely to cheat in relationships because they have a greater control over themselves. They can delay gratification, and they are much more organized. They are much more hardworking. From that perspective, they are more likely to be also having no money problems, right? So all these things could be beneficial for the relationship. Now, one big five personality, extraversion, can be potentially problematic because it is positively correlated with narcissism. Again, this does not mean to say that all extroverted individuals are highly narcissistic. No, but they are positively correlated, and it's a fairly strong correlation. So we should be wary of overtly extremely extroverted individuals. We should be looking out for any narcissistic tendencies in them, more so than an introverted individual. Now, apart from these big five personality traits, I would also like to highlight something else, which are called the Hexaco personality traits. The Hexaco personality traits are nothing but the big five personality traits plus one additional new trait called the honesty humility trait. So this is, you could call them the big six. So the big five has been in the literature for a long time, but over the last 1 decade, 1.5 decades, there has been a big amount of research happening that shows that there is a sixth dimension, personality dimension, called the honesty humility dimension, and it is showing up to be significant in many contexts, and this is one of those contexts where it matters a lot. So you can see that once honesty humility dimension is taken into the picture, none of the big five personality traits are statistically significant anymore, except for extroversion in case of narcissism. So we should still be wary of extroverted individuals slightly, because of their potential tendency to be narcissistic. But none of the other big five personality traits are significant here, as you can see. They are not. They are. We see some correlations, but they are not big enough to be statistically significant. Big enough to be for us to be sure that these are real correlations and not correlations that we found just by a matter of chance. So honesty, humility is strongly negatively correlated with psychopathy, negatively correlated with Machiavellianism, and also with narcissism. So people who are honest and humble, those are the kinds of people then we should be looking out for, again, in relationships. By the way, honesty here means that being honest to others, but it also means being honest to oneself, not having exaggerated views about oneself, not deceiving oneself. That is very important as well, right? And being humble, not bragging always. So that is the honesty humility dimension. It has four facets: being fair to everyone, being sincere, greed avoidance, so not being overly greedy, and being modest, which is like not bragging. So honesty humility dimension is a great dimension to look for, again, in people for long-term relationships, because we see that all these dimensions are strongly negatively correlated with psychopathy. All of these dimensions are again negatively correlated with Machiavellianism. Same is the case with narcissism, except for one facet. Everything else is strongly negatively correlated with narcissism. So honesty, humility is a great thing to look for in relationships. By the way, it turns out honesty, humility is a great dimension even in context of relationships. There has been a lot of research that shows that being humble can be a great asset even in leadership contexts. Jim Collins, for instance, who coined the term level 5 leadership. So he talks about 5 different levels of leadership. Level 5 leaders are the most effective leaders. And he finds in his research that the most effective leaders are the ones who have two qualities. They are humble and at the same time very determined, strong-willed individuals. So it turns out that same is true even in context of relationships. So that's what you should be looking for in context of the big 5 personality traits, or big 6 if we take honesty, humility dimension into account. By the way, there will be certain gender differences as well. Agreeableness would matter more when we are looking for a female partner. It would matter a little less when it comes to looking for a male partner. So there are certain gender differences, but I am not delving too deep there, but I will touch upon it slightly in the next slide. Our discussion that we were having about the different mating strategies, the short-term mating strategies versus the long-term mating strategies. So we mentioned how people who are high on the dark triad traits tend to follow a more of a short-term mating strategy. There are gender differences as well. Males, again, generally tend to prefer short-term mating strategies, and females prefer more long-term mating strategies, and there are evolutionary reasons for it. Even the anxious versus avoidant attachment style that we had discussed before, there are gender differences there as well. Women, for instance, tend to have more anxious attachment style compared to men, who tend to have more of an avoidance attachment style. So there are biological differences when it comes to some of these strategies. Still, it is important that we take these factors into account. Otherwise, we could end up in a problematic relationship, which would then cause us a lot of grief. It's better to prevent as opposed to manage a problematic relationship. Your textbook talks about the common areas of conflict within intimate relationships, and those are sexual relations. Is there sufficient sexual intimacy within the relationship? If there is, that's good. Um, do you engage in extramarital affairs? That's very problematic. That can become a major point of contention in relationships. Monetary problems can be, again, major problem in relationships. Personal habits. For example, somebody may be very organized and orderly, keeping things tidy, clean and tidy, whereas another partner may be just the opposite. And that then can create a lot of conflict. So you can see this also relates to our personality traits. For example, the likelihood of somebody engaging in extramarital affairs is much lower for people who are conscientious, who are high on the honesty, humility dimension. Conscientious people are also less likely to have monetary problems because they plan things better, they work hard. Same with respect to personal habits. They are likely to have much more orderly habits, right? Um, Jealousy. People who are high on neuroticism are more likely to be jealous individuals, which can then create conflict in relationships. Not caring enough for in-laws. Or having problems with in-laws. That is more likely if a person is lower on the agreeableness dimension. So you are seeing that we are seeing the exact similar kind of pattern across many literature, across many studies. So we should be careful about the kind of people we choose in our relationships. But if you are already living together, what do? You engage in constant communication, and more than constant, it's about being open, honest, and assertive in the communication. And both the partners need to do that. Again, not too assertive, which verging on being aggressive, that becomes problematic. And it is important that you fight fair. So fighting in relationships is not a problem, but it is important that you are fair in your fight. But how do you fight fair, especially when you are in that heightened negative emotion during any conflict, during any fight that you're having with your partner? Well, if you are lucky enough to have low neuroticism, then you will not as easily get emotionally agitated because you are emotionally stable. But what if you are not, or what if your partner is not? And that's where meditation comes into play, because there is again a lot of research that you can see that shows the more mindful we are, the more awareness we can bring to the present as opposed to getting lost in our emotions, the better it is for that love and commitment in the relationship, as opposed to having even after the conflict, having anxiety or anger or hostility towards one's partner. So meditation turns out to be a great way to develop that capacity. But you already know that. We have already discussed that several times. Well, what else can we do apart from meditation? John Gottman's research gives us some interesting insights about that. John Gottman, he was a professor at University of Washington, and he has done some phenomenal work on this particular topic. He could predict with 94% accuracy whether a relationship is going to last or is it going to lead to a divorce or breakdown of the relationship. So one of the major findings that comes from his research is what is called the positivity ratio, 5:1 positivity ratio. So negative interactions, anytime that we are having a negative emotional interaction with anybody, negative interactions are much more powerful than positive interactions. You may be good friends with somebody, but there is one negative interaction and you may remember that for much longer period of time. You may brood over it, you may ruminate over it for a much longer period of time, even though you have had a lot of positive interactions, right? So what Gottman finds in his research, that relationships that tend to be happier, that tend to last longer, they have at least a 5:1 positivity ratio. Again, we are talking about positive interactions, not neutral interactions. In positive interactions, there is a positive expression of emotions, not just business-like interactions. So at least you should then consciously try to have more positive interactions, 5 times as many positive interactions than any negative interaction that you have. That can enhance the quality of the relationship and consequently bring down the stress that you experience in the relationship. Arthur Aaron's research also gives some interesting ideas. He finds that if you do things together, and especially new things together, that brings in excitement into the relationship. Relationships, especially in the longer term, can become very boring. We may start taking each other for granted. So when you make an effort to try out new things and doing things together, that enhances the positivity in the relationship, which then of course leads to reduction of stress in the relationship and greater enhances the satisfaction that you get from your relationships. I will stop this presentation with what you should not do. Again, John Gottman's research gives us some great insights about it. He talks about what are called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So these 4 things, criticism, being defensive, expressing contempt, and stonewalling in your interactions with your partner, these are the biggest predictors of divorce or separation if it is not a marriage. These are the biggest predictors of unhappiness in relationships. And I will elaborate that more in the next slide. The first major predictor of problematic relationships is criticism. Do you criticize your partner a lot? And by that, I mean, do you make attributions, negative attributions about the person's personality, about the person's intentions? That is problematic for relationships. Not that you cannot have any discussion, any disagreements. That's fine. But if you blame the person, you blame the personality, that is something that people find very offensive, and that is very toxic to the relationship. So it may manifest in form of things like you always do this way, or you never do what I want get done. That then is problematic. I can say that I'm unhappy that you did this, or I'm unhappy that you did not do this. That is fair. That's a fair fight. But when you say you always do this or you never do this, that is a criticism that you're making of the person in his entirety. That is very toxic to the relationship. Defensiveness. Defensiveness is not listening to a person's grievances, not patiently listening. Instead, you come up with a counter complaint. It's like engaging in whataboutery. You may say, oh, what about this? How come you had done that? And so again, realize this is a defense mechanism. Instead of you taking responsibility for the problem, you are now shifting the blame on the other person by finding some mistake that the person had done some other time. And it may have been true. It may have been true that the person may have committed similar kind of mistakes some time else. But when you don't listen and you become defensive, that is very toxic to the relationship. So it is important that you listen, patiently hear out your partner anytime that you're having a conflict, and take some responsibility for the problem as opposed to shifting the blame on the other person. The third one is contempt, and this is the most toxic of the 4 factors that bring down relationships. So what does contempt mean? It means you are very contemptuous of the partner. You have absolutely no respect, and this often gets manifested in form of eye rolling, which is like taking the partner and throwing in the trash, mocking your partner, making fun of your partner. Again, this is not happening in any positive jest. It's literally mocking your partner. It could happen by calling them names, or you sneer at the partner. This is the most toxic of all the four categories. If there is contempt in the relationship, then that is a sure sign that there is going to be major problems in the relationship and breakdown in the relationship. Again, this does not mean that if it is present currently in your relationship that you cannot change. You can change, right? You can consciously try not to be contemptuous, because hey, at one point of time you chose this person to be your life partner, right? So there could be a misjudgment that you are engaging in here. And another thing that you can consciously do is build a culture of appreciation, which is the 5:1 ratio that I was talking about before. So it is important that you appreciate your partner, and typically you will see that your partner would be doing a lot of things right, and it is important that you appreciate many more times. 5:1 is a minimum ratio. You could do more, right? And then occasionally you have an angry argument with your partner, even if it is strongly negative, probably will compensate for all that positivity that was there. So contempt is something that you have to be extremely careful of in relationships. And the last one is stonewalling, and this is like you withdraw, you become like a wall, you stop talking, you don't engage in the conflict, the conversation that you were having, the discussion, the argument that you were having. So this is seen more amongst men than it is seen in women. And to be fair, sometimes men may be getting overwhelmed by that argument. They may be actually wanting to take a break, excuse me. But it is important that you say that, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed. I need 15 minutes time to calm myself down, and then we can talk this over. So that would be a more wise strategy. So these are the don'ts, and for each of those don'ts there was a description of what you could do, otherwise the antidote. So if you do these things, you are much more likely to be less stressed in your relationships, and you can actually have a happy and positive relationship.